Welcome to Mission Minded, the podcast where we explore outside-the-box thinking in carrying out Christ's Great Commission. On this week's episode, we are joined by Tim Williams, president of mPower Approach. Our sponsor for today's podcast is Dignity Roasters Coffee, locally roasted and packaged by the distressed to fuel each day. Dignity Roasters was born through a passion to partner with the distressed and the desire of bringing the universally loved beverage of coffee to your hands. To order your own coffee or to learn more about Dignity Roasters, visit their website at dignityroasters.com. Now here's your host, Jim Tingler and John Spinn.
Hi, and welcome back to the Mission Minded Podcast. I'm Jim.
Yeah, and I'm John.
And here we're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of John and Tim meeting.
Yeah.
Yep.
July of 2011, almost 10 years ago now. Hard to believe.
So, Tim, why don't you introduce yourself for those who might not be familiar?
Well, I don't mind saying my name. My name's Tim Williams. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I have lived there since 1988, and I'm a dentist. I was by myself, alone, doing dentistry for 15 years, the first 15 years of my career. Then I moved over to the University of Tennessee Medical Center, a hospital, where I teach in a residency program and also have a practice as well, which will be important to know as we continue to talk how God works things out, because this was not on my radar in 2003 when I moved over to the university. So I've been there since 2003. And been involved in missions since probably 2010. And John's right, met him in 2011, soon after I started doing any international mission work to speak of. And God has just been rocking our world. It's just an amazing ride. Married, got 2 kids, 5 grandbabies now. 2 of them are twins. They're awesome. So we won't spend all day talking about that, just to say that God has richly blessed me, and I am thrilled to be back down here with you guys in person with no masks.
Yeah,
True.
for sure.
John, one of our first in-person guests on the show for a while, right?
Yep, it's been a little while.
Been a little while, yeah.
But John, so where did you guys meet?
Well, we were in Uganda, near, was it Iganga? Yep. Yeah, so this was back in July of 2011, and it wasn't my first dental trip, but it was my first training trip, and for you as well, Tim.
Yes, my
and
first
there
trip.
were 4 dentists. The team leader was a guy, Eric, a guy that we grew up in the same church, small town, Central Illinois, same at dental school. He was 3 years ahead of me, and then another dentist. So there were 4 of us, and Tim and I this was our first time just kind of contemplating this idea of training, and so that's where we met.
Was that with mPower?
With mPower Approach, right. And yeah.
And it's been a good 10 years. We keep bumping into each other.
That's true.
In the field and at different mission conferences, even around the world too, I think. So we bumped into each other in Kenya at a missions meeting, I think.
So
okay.
That was eventful. We're not going to talk about that.
Okay.
so Tim, had you been involved in medical mission trips up to that point?
Yeah, I had done local ministry for many, many years of my career. So I started in dentistry in 1988. So from 1988 to probably 2005 or 6 or so, most of my mission stuff involved local stuff, not leaving the country. As you heard me say, I have 2 kids. My wife, who is right under God, said, you're not going to go out of the country because I know you. You'll do something crazy, which she was probably right. And so we did mostly local stuff. And there's plenty of outreach that people can do in their local community, healthcare providers and or lay people. So the field was still ripe, right? Mm-hmm. But I had known my whole career, I knew that God was going to eventually put me somewhere doing something using a skill or a talent that he gave me. I thought it would be my singing voice, because I used to sing on praise teams all over,
really?
And in groups all over.
I didn't know this.
Oh, yeah. You've never heard me sing.
Wow.
Only mission stuff. And I thought
Can
God
you
was
give
going
us
to use me.
Can you give us a sample today?
Well, I've got a little bit of a cold, but yeah, I could. What do you want to hear?
I don't know.
Our God is an awesome God. He reigns
Yeah, Rich
from
Mullins.
heaven
There you go.
above. One of my favorite artists, by the way.
Okay.
And that's all you're going to get.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
That's a total
If I do
surprise.
more than 3 or
Total
4
bonus.
bars, I expect.
We've never had
I
that
expect
happen.
Yeah.
Kickback. So,
Okay.
Okay.
So
Where could somebody get a copy of your demo?
you know what? I actually have.
We'll put it on the show notes. A link
Believe
to
it
his
or not,
Okay.
there are tapes.
Okay.
cassette
Tapes,
Okay.
not CDs or
cassette
CDs.
tape.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
No,
okay.
no.
All right.
As recently as probably 20. Well, right before I went on the mission field.
Okay.
Because what I found out when one is in the mission field and you're singing praise songs in English, if you're in a primarily non-English speaking area, they don't understand. So there's no edification that you can do other than just the tune. And so nothing was happening. I was singing my heart out for Jesus, and I was in India, actually, and the folks were just looking at me like I was, I don't know what it was like, but they were not responding. And then it occurred to me, wait a minute. God gave you a dental degree and some knowledge and some gifts. Let's do that. And from that point on, it was easy.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like God finally said, "No, you're not going to be singing. You're going to be doing what I've raised you to do." He really gifted, and I know John will agree with this. God gifts people with skill sets, and to be a gifted dentist is a privilege. Honestly, it's a privilege.
Well, and I think that is a kind of a historical shift in missions. You look at like the scatter global movement. Everybody historically was told, if you want to serve God, go to seminary, forsake your career, go to seminary and be a missionary. And now we're seeing, especially in the closed world, health professionals of various kinds those are the only people that can get into some of these countries, closed countries. Right. And so just looking at things very differently from the historical model of, forsaking your profession and going to seminary and then becoming a missionary.
And I don't think that's an accident. I think that is God ordained, because what we do, and this is ITEC, and everyone knows ITEC is all about training, and so is mPower that I work with now, is to go train. And it is vocational training that we extend to the world. There's not theological training, although that's valuable, but most of these countries even have Bible colleges. I know India does for sure. I know Uganda does for sure. And so they have training institutes. What they don't have is skilled workers with professional backgrounds or business backgrounds to come in and actually share what they know, teach knowledge.
Yeah.
And that was a shock to me. The first time I ever did a trip, when you heard us say with John, the first trip I ever did was in India. I sang and worked. Okay, it was a doing trip, and many times, many of the people listening may or may not know, we have doing trips and then we have teaching trips is kind of how I lined them out. And I did a doing trip, and I was worn out. I was exhausted. This would be a great time to probably tell you guys how I found ITEC, because a lot of people don't know this story. So I do a week and a half in India. I'm in South India and outside Bangalore. And working under the trees. It's just what you read about. We're sitting up under trees and, the whole thing. Work really, really hard. It was fruitful, okay? It was a blessing to us. I learned a lot. My first international trip ever in my life could have been anywhere but India. And I couldn't, because India is as different culturally, food
from Knoxville, a little different from Knoxville,
a little different than the hill folks. There was nothing like what we see in Tennessee in India. Smells, it was just incredible. So after the culture shock wore off, you start to see people and you start to love the people, and then and anyone that's done any mission work outside of the U.S., you start to realize that God made us with very similar needs, desires, and wants, and everyone deserves love, and you just fall in love with the people, which we did. But about the day 5 or 6 in, I loved the people, but I didn't like bending over. My back was just paying the price. And this was 2010.
Doing the dental work.
Oh, paying the yes, because we were sitting in a chair, much like we're sitting in, just a plastic, chair. And I would have to bend over and twist, and John knows all about this. Being a dentist, you do that anyway. But repeatedly, day after day after day, took its toll, such that I had to take a week after I got back just to recover. So I'm thinking there's got to be a better way. I don't know if there's a dental chair that I can take in the field, but if I could get him in a chair and lean him back, I could sit in the chair and I wouldn't be exhausted, and then I could see probably 50, 100 more people a day if I needed to do that. And as God would have it, I don't even use the word luck anymore. There's too many things happening for this to have been luck. As God would have it, there was a man in my church, and this is in Knoxville, Tennessee, a man in my church that said, hey, I think I have a connection to a dental chair for you. There's a guy named Steve Saint. He's down in Florida, and he has a place that makes dental chairs to take on mission field. And so I thought, gosh, Mike, that's a great idea. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll fly you down.
Whoa.
Because he's a pilot.
Wow.
He said, I'll fly you down, and we'll go meet Steve, and we'll look at the chair, and then I'll even buy the chair for you if you want it. I said, man, that's great. And we never got weather. We never had appropriate weather. When I was off work, he was off work, and the skies would be clear enough to fly because he was not instrument trained, and we couldn't get it. Long story shorter, or long story long, I finally just got a commercial flight, flew down, drove up. That was in probably March, April, May. I'm thinking it may have been June of 2010, June or July of 2010. After the trip, I said, there's got to be something we can do. Saw the chair, and I don't even remember who it was at ITEC at the time. Said, well, have you ever just thought of maybe not doing the work but teaching it? And I thought to myself, not in a million years. Nope. No, I teach resident doctors who have graduated, and I know what all's involved in dentistry. I can't even imagine thinking about teaching. And he said, well, do some research, do some prayer. I said, well, do you know anybody that's done this? And he said, yeah, a guy named Charlie Vitito out of Louisville, Kentucky has a group called mPower Approach that he founded, and I think he founded it in 2006 or something like that, along with Steve Saint. Mm-hmm. They co-founded that, I think, at the same around the same time. I know the dental module came along then. Anyway, so I'm just randomly calling because I don't want to buy a chair or have someone buy me a chair that's not going to work. So I called, and I'm trying to find Charlie. Well, Charlie wasn't in practice anymore. Come to find out, Charlie is now a missions pastor at Southeast Christian Church, and so I run him down by phone. I say, Charlie, this is Tim Williams. You don't know me, but I understand you have a dental chair thing, mPower. And he said, well, yeah, but we don't just go sell them and do it. We're going to teach people, and I said, can I come up? And he said, well, come on, but I don't do that anymore. I'm a missions pastor. You need to talk to Linda Webster, who's the executive director, still is the executive director, and made a trip up there out of the blue. She said, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you just come on a trip with us? We're going to be in Uganda in July of 2011. And I said, and we have a young dentist he's in the armed forces at the time. He's coming down, so it's his first trip too, and we're going to try this out. And I got to tell you, and John may already told you, and he will back me up on this, I was blown away. I didn't think in 4 days that it would be possible to train a layperson, most with no college education, how to extract teeth. And to watch it happen was absolutely astounding.
And I think one of the things about that trip for me, because we were both in the same boat of kind of open, maybe skeptical to this idea, but yes. I think that probably the most helpful thing for me is that there were two students that had been trained a year before, and they came back, Peter and Joseph. And I know Peter, that when I got to see these guys, I was like, wow, because I think Peter had taken out maybe 200 or 300 teeth in the last year, and I was impressed, and I think that seeing the returnees and really helped me believe that this was possible. And so I think that was very, very helpful for me to be able to see that.
Yeah. And they were teaching. They were actually, of course, most of them didn't speak English well, but Peter and Joseph spoke the local language very well, and it was much easier for them to show them the skills that they had picked up. It's really, really such a nice model.
And now you're a part of mPower.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happened too. So I told you I teach residents in a hospital, and so we're teaching the residents, and I'm doing dentistry, and I was looking for something more, not just going on a trip every year or whatever. I was wanting to do something else, and I said, God, I don't really know what you want me to do. I have no idea, but I know how now to do what you want me to do. So we sat back and waited. I've learned to wait on God now. I don't rush out and jump in things. God brings things and says, here's your plan. Here you go. Got a phone call from Linda, and just thought they may want me to be on the board or something. And they said, no, would you just like to be president? And I said, we don't have a president of mPower. We've never had a president of mPower. I said, well, we do now because we want you to come on board and help guide us a little bit, which I had to take a few weeks. I didn't know what that meant. It's been eye-opening working in ministry. Okay. It's been a pleasure. I have met people through mPower, the ministry side of it, that I would never have met just in the mission field. I wouldn't have had an opportunity to encounter them. And so it's been valuable to me. My wife and I have been up to Louisville several times. I've been there, and of course that's where I see you guys a lot at the GMHCs that they have there in Louisville at Southeast Christian. And I got to tell you, it's really been neat. I really don't know. I'm only part-time president because I'm still a full-time dentist and a full-time educator here on the state side. And with COVID, that kind of threw everything up in the air. But we're about to hit the road again, and I'm not really sure where God's going to take us there, but it's been nothing but an exciting ride. I like to tell people all the time, if you're not sure what you're wanting to do, if you're not sure where God's going to put you, if you think I have this skill or I don't have any skill or whatever, you just say the prayer, I will do whatever you want me to do. I'll go wherever you want me to go. Just you speak to me and make it plain that this is what you want for my life. And then hold on. I bet everybody in this room, anybody listening that's involved in missions or any ministry will tell you it is a wild ride. And it's been a blast. It has been such fun. Not all easy. I don't want it to make it sound like it's all, ice cream and chocolate
Rainbows and
cupcakes.
unicorns.
It's not. It's hard work. Please don't misunderstand. We've all traveled. You know what it's like sitting in airports. You know what it's like to not have air conditioning. Been in a hospital a time or two, but that's okay because God's always there. He's always with me, and He's always with us. He promised that. And so if you lean into God's promises, it's just amazing to see what happens.
That's great. John, I was curious, had you been involved in medical mission trips before that trip in 2011?
Well, I did a trip in college, global health outreach with the CMDA. I was not even thinking about dentistry at that point. I was working with eyeglasses. In 2009, 2007, I went to Haiti as a dental student, worked with a dentist from Washington State that went there every year. And then 2009, I went to Nicaragua with some classmates. And that was the first time 2009 going to Nicaragua was the first time I'd traveled since completing dental school. And I remember going on that trip and, we saw, it was a short trip. We saw maybe 50 patients over like a day or 2 or 3 days, maybe between the guys that were there. And, we did some good. No question about that. But I did walk away from that. I think kind of like you of, is there something more? Is there, what, when we leave, the dentistry stops,
Yes.
And I think Charlie's story, some of us are, the three of us are familiar with that story, but for those listening, Charlie's in Jamaica and he's, like you say, Tim, back-breaking long days,
Yes.
and he's taking out teeth, and the last day, the guy who's in charge of crowd control comes to Charlie and say, Charlie, what do I tell all these people that are in line? Because you're not going to get to everybody in the line. And Charlie said, I don't know. He said, but I got to keep working, and I got a flight to catch. And the guy came back later, and he was just sobbing, and what do I tell all these people?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really shook Charlie, of
that there were more patients that needed his care.
Absolutely. He said, what's the first thing you see on a short-term trip? It's a long line. What's the last thing you see? A longer line than when you started. And so that really, caused Charlie to reevaluate, ask questions. Could we do this differently? And that was his journey. And then we're a few years behind Charlie, but
Yes.
you think about in the footsteps of a predecessor like that, that just seeing where God has taken, you think about,
right.
ITEC, Steve Saint and Charlie did the first dental trainings in 2004. It was all, in Ghana, and then in India, I think the following year in 2005, and just to see where that's gone today,
Sure. But so for those that are listening, maybe there's a dentist involved in medical mission trips. Obviously, ITEC would be a place to look into, mPower as
Absolutely.
well. But I think a bigger question, because there's probably a lot of people who aren't dentists that are listening. What is the challenge? Why is dentistry such a big need around the world?
Well, the World Health Organization, and correct me if I'm wrong here, John, the World Health Organization has basically said the greatest needs globally, before COVID, obviously, were vision care and dental care. Those are the things that were most lacking. And what we find is, and we see this as we travel, you'll go into a country that may have 300,000 dentists, but 285,000 of those dentists are in and around the major metropolitan areas, and you get outside of any major city in a developing, or not even a developing country, some of your second world, maybe, I guess, for lack of a better word, countries, you get too far outside the city and there's no care. There's no medical, there's no dental, sometimes no access to clean water. The list goes on and on. Certainly no vision care. And so the need is great.
Right.
Don't have to be a dentist to be able to go teach people something. Basic vision care is something that we can train lay people to teach. Dental hygienists teach how to clean teeth. Dentists are teaching how to pull teeth. We have nurses that go teach wound care. We have physicians that go teach basic medical. We have sister ministries actually that get more involved and teach how to do pre and postnatal care on babies that are born.
helping babies breathe. Yeah.
Yes, and so the possibilities are endless. Farming, I know ITEC does farming skills, and I think that's incredible. We have been in Zoom calls even with people. I learned this through COVID, and this is a blessing of COVID if there is one. If there is a Zoom call that can be done with believers in South Africa who are our facilitators, several people in America, and folks in other countries who could get on and learn about how to teach business skills alongside what we're doing. It's just amazing. So there's lots to do.
And who are you training? When you're going overseas, is it the local church?
Great question. We try to partner in most cases with a local in-country, and we'll say indigenous partner who has ministry already present, who knows the culture, knows the language, knows the local government officials, the health boards, what have you. They will contact us or we will contact them. It is still astounding to me how we all get put together, and it has to be a God thing because some of these folks are finding out about us and ITEC through some crazy ways that we couldn't orchestrate if we tried on the human perspective. So they'll find us or we'll find them, and then we will make contacts and we'll do some email conversations and we'll talk about expectations, what we're going to do as the teachers that we're going to come in, how we're going to teach. But they have responsibilities as the partner one of those responsibilities is finding the students, and we give them some guidelines on here's who you kind of want to look for. You can't be afraid of blood if you're doing dental work, right? And you need to be able to be there for the training, because being present for all the days of training is pretty important, because we move quick. We teach quickly. We go hands-on after day 1.5. We're hands-on. So we need that. They will set up the facilities. The local partner will find the areas we're going to be working in, and also try to make contact, if they want to, with local officials so that they know that we're coming to work. And it just is it messy at times? Yeah, but ministry's messy, and that's
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus, I'm sure, scratched his head with the disciples and went, this is so messy. So, Father, what have you done? And yet you see what's happened. So.
Yeah. So you're working with these rural areas that you mentioned. The major cities might have a bunch of dentists, but you get out in the rural areas, and so the churches in those communities can provide dental care as a way to meet some of the needs.
That is the absolute reason we go. Yeah, healthcare is necessary, okay? But Jesus said, go heal the sick and proclaim the good news, okay? You heal the sick and proclaim the good news. Sometimes, particularly in light of what John and I do, is hand in glove. They work together. And so these dental health workers that we call, as we call them, the dental health workers, once they're trained, then they have opportunity to go to areas that are, quite frankly, pretty heavily persecuted for just a itinerant preacher that would come in or to share the gospel. But if they come in bearing skills to help the community,
right,
they're welcome with open arms. They are allowed to then help the people, but share the gospel.
Right.
And our eyes have been opened into how our brothers and sisters in these countries can share the gospel off of a platform of decay is like sin, a wound is like Jesus took our wounds, and it's just incredible to watch them do their thing. I've learned more than they have, just quite frankly.
The evangelistic opportunities in that.
Yeah, and I think some of these, I think you have to think about, just put some numbers to it. In the United States, if you're in an area with less than one dentist for 5,000 people, that's considered a healthcare shortage area. And some of these African countries have one dentist for 1 million people. And so and some of these African countries have, in other places in the world, have no dental school. They have no way of bringing up any kind of dental worker. So I think about some of our partners we work with in Liberia, and there's 5 counties in southeast Liberia that have no dental presence. And they said to go someplace, it'd be $100 US to get a bus ride to go someplace to actually get where you could get a tooth extracted, and then you have to pay for that on top of that. And so, the things that you talk about, Tim, of the parallels between sin and decay, we do that in our training module. The James 1, evil desire gives birth to sin when it's full grown gives birth to death. This parallel of decaying over the enamel to the dentin to the pulp, and then the pulp dying, and then that can spread into a space infection. And so just those parallels that are really readily, when I was in Papua New Guinea with mPower back in 2013, they had a sign up that said that, something about dentist. Rasim was the word to extract a tooth. Well, I went to the church service on Wednesday night, and they said Jesus came to remove our sin as the same word, Rasim, the same word in their language, the same using to extract a tooth, and Jesus removing our sin. So there's a lot of parallels that, if you think about some of the stuff you said, Tim, about opening the door. The second dental training ITEC did in 2005 in India was in an area where they had killed a pastor a few months earlier who had tried to come in and evangelize, and and so just coming back later with a skill that the community, they need the gospel, but maybe not see that as a need, but at least knowing that they had dental needs.
Right.
And similar story in North Africa with a guy that was in an area that Al Qaeda was, and the people actually protected him and said, you can't kill this guy, he's our dentist. And where the skills allowed him in an area that was hostile to the gospel. And so that's really our bigger vision for this of, getting access to people that you might not otherwise have access to. Yes, it's meeting a healthcare need, but it's bigger picture of evangelistic goals.
Yeah.
So
We could say, we can take your tooth out and remove your pain, but we can't save your eternal soul, which is more important.
Right.
So,
Yeah. More concerned with somebody's eternal destination rather than just health care. But it's an opportunity to meet needs in those communities. So what are some of those problems? I know maybe our listeners have maybe had a cavity or something, an abscess, but what are the long-term complications that can happen when those, because you mentioned extracting teeth. And I think that might be a little different for a lot of people, thinking on some of these training trips, a student might extract 20, 30 teeth. Is that right?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I was at a dental meeting in West Virginia just 2 months ago. I was talking to two recent graduates from another state, and to graduate from dental school, they only had to extract 10 teeth in 4 years of professional training. I couldn't believe it. This is 2020. 2020,
19 or
19
20.
or 20,
Yes.
that to graduate from a dental school in the United States, they only had to extract 10 teeth.
Wow.
Right? So
what happens if you leave those teeth in?
well, a necrotic tooth is just kind of a time bomb. When the pulp is inflamed, the patient's in a lot of pain and they're pursuing care usually.
The pulp, is that part of the tooth?
The nerve.
Right, where the nerve of the tooth and the blood
Okay.
supply is. And what will happen, it's a spiritual parallel of, eventually the pulp will die and the pain will go away and then the patient stops. So a lot of these developing countries, it's very survival mode. Dentistry is kind of a luxury. You only seek dental care if you're in pain. The idea of like going to the dentist on a regular basis to preventative, like get your teeth cleaned, that's foreign in most of these places. And so sometimes people in a developed context can't really think that way because it's very survivalist. And so, if you got a necrotic tooth, it's really a time bomb. The bacteria can erode through the bones, spread into the soft tissue. If it's localized, it's fine. But if it spreads into a space infection, I was in Liberia 2 years ago. We saw a guy with a submandibular space infection from a lower tooth, and I was real impressed with the student. As a guy we had trained, he drained he punctured the soft tissue, trying to get it drained, got the tooth out.
So what is that in layman's terms?
He lanced the area.
The bigger issue, because I've seen the pictures.
Yes.
I know what you're talking about.
This guy had submandibular space down below the jaw here started to swell, and that's getting closer to the airway. And what you don't want is like a Ludwig's angina when it crosses the other side.
So yeah, it looked like the
That
guy
could-
had a grapefruit right below his jaw.
Yeah, so that's that's probably one of the most common concerns on the lower teeth. If you've got a space infection spreading to potentially close off the airway, thankfully that's pretty rare, but it happens. People. I remember a lady in Sierra Leone showed us some pictures of a kid that had died from an untreated, had a necrotic tooth that just allowed, and it got so the infection spread and
Death from
hadn't been
dental
dealt with.
infection is not uncommon in developing countries because they can't get care. They don't have access to care. They don't know how to get care, even if they do. They will do witch doctors. They'll go to the local shaman. They'll put a poultice on and hope it helps. They will try to dig them out with boar's teeth or whatever they can get their hands on, because if anyone's ever had a toothache, you know what we're talking about. It's not something you just say, well, I'm not going to forget about this and go about my business. You can't. So they'll crazy things like putting battery acid on a piece of cotton and shoving it in the hole. Things that we wouldn't think of in America because we have access to care by and large.
Right.
And death is the ultimate end goal. It can be, okay. Fortunately, if we have enough dental health workers that we can train, if we can find enough American or European believers to go train people, we're starting to see the eradication in surrounding villages as because John is right. As we go back, we don't just go back and train one bunch and leave and never go see them again. We try to return and train a few more and a few more and a few more, with the whole goal being to reach out from a central area into the more remote villages to make sure, number one, they're getting good health care. Okay, they're not doing crazy things to themselves to try to make pain stop. But number two, they're hearing the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Which, let me think, is the goal.
Yeah.
Right? So
Right.
that's why we're there.
That's why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
That's good. So what are some of the craziest things that you've seen as somebody trying to solve those issues? I know you mentioned a couple, but I know you've probably encountered, you or John, have you encountered anything as well?
Yeah, I have a picture that I often show and slide of the guy in Liberia that had a tooth was bothering him, and he went to the witch doctor, and they put herbs in the pulp and put a sheet metal screw in the tooth, and wasn't very successful. So we extracted the tooth. But yeah, desperate people will do, and that's why I say teach the right people the right way. Like I said, we want people with good hands and a good heart, people that want to help their people and want to share the gospel. Those are the people we want to train.
Well, and I'll tell you this too. I'm going to put this out there, and it may be a bit controversial. Many, many times I'm asked, well, why don't you just train everybody? Why are you only training believers? And I made no secret of this fact that there is no way that I think I could humanly possibly train a layperson from day 1 to day 5 to take out teeth safely and effectively without the guidance of the Holy Spirit. I just don't think so. Could I teach a basic skill? Yes. But I can tell you this, in my practice, sometimes I've gotten into some really difficult situations, and I will actually stop and I will pray, God, guide my hands. I'm in a really tight spot here. Mm-hmm. And God answers prayer, guys. He does. And so having that ability, and we tell our students, we tell the trainees and guys and men and women, pray with your patients, pray for your patients, and pray for God to guide your hands. And, in America, I think sometimes that's a bit lost on us and may sound hokey, but I'm telling you, when you see it in the field time after time after time, how these students will stop and they will pray, and things just, it's no less than a miracle, okay? There's healing occurring, but some of these things that are happening are miraculous in how God guides the hands of these basically fishermen, if you will. Okay, to use a parallel from Jesus' day, he's training fishermen how to fish for souls now instead of fish, and to watch them take out teeth now and actually share the gospel with people who've never heard it. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing. Well,
and I think that the heart a lot. In America in healthcare, a lot of the focus is on GPAs, board scores, things like that have nothing to do with. Are you a person of integrity that really cares about people? And so, I remember ITEC did a dental training in Mozambique years ago, and they said the government dental workers, very uncompassionate. They would give you one shot, and if you're numb, that's great. If you're not, they're just going to keep working. Oh, and so, a lot of, yes, the technical skill is important, but it's also, do you really care about people? Do you have compassion? And that can't be taught. God has to do a work. You have to have a right heart that only God, you can teach people skills, but if you don't care about people, and so a lot of things in dentistry aren't, when you read about a dentist in the newspaper that's in trouble with the law, it's usually not because they don't have adequate training. It's because they were morally deficient. Yes. And so that's where building on the right foundation is not GPA and good board scores. It's somebody that really cares about people, wants to serve people, has compassion, and those are the people that you give the skills, not the other way around. We're seeing the pitfalls of that in our education system, of not looking at character and just looking at skill.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned earlier the Global Mission Health Conference, where you said GMHC.
Yes.
But I'm just thinking, somebody that's maybe involved in the health field somewhere, would that be a good place to explore as well? Could actually probably meet you guys there in person. Yes. John hasn't missed a year in how long?
I don't know. I've gone most years since 2003. So
Wow.
I missed a few, but don't have a perfect attendance pin from Sunday school for that, but close.
And you normally go, right, Tim?
Yes, I've been there. Of course, last year it was virtual because of COVID, but every year since, probably God opened my eyes to the ability to teach people. 2011 maybe. I might have missed one. I think it was in the hospital once, but other than that, I've been there. I've tried to be there every year. Be there this year, but that is a great place. If you're have any healthcare professional, if you're a student, if you want to be a student, if you want to see what it looks like to be a believing healthcare professional in America, if you want to make connections with global ministries, ITEC, mPower approach, but there's literally ministries from around the globe that are there. If you want to see what God can do for you, through you, that's a great place to go. I forgot the dates this year. Is it November?
It's usually the second weekend of November.
Yeah,
usually when it is
8th or 9th.
in Louisville.
I'm sure it'll be posted on our websites before it's over with. And but yeah, it's a great place to go. That's where I met a vast majority of the ITEC folks here, and it's where I continue to go see people that I see usually once or twice a year, unless we bump into each other in an airport somewhere. We still try to get together and talk and love each other and encourage each other. So yeah, it's a great place to come. Even if you're not in medical per se, if you're not a dentist or a medical student or a dental hygiene student or a physical therapy student or a nursing student, those are all welcome, by the way, at GMHC. But if you're just a lay person and you really want to see how God can use you, there are, in the mission field, there are tons of opportunities for non-healthcare professionals in a support role, in a way that helps sterilization, which doesn't take a great deal of training. And my wife, actually, on the trips that we've been on before, she's an incredible listener. She would just sit and speak to the people, the ladies primarily, that would come, and they have incredible burdens. And by the way, she's now a counselor. She went back and got her counseling degree after one of our trips.
That's great.
Yeah, so God opens the doors for people. If you're really interested, GMHC is a great place to start. If you can't get to GMHC in Louisville this fall, you can certainly contact ITEC or mPower Approach. Our websites I'm sure will be available somewhere.
Right.
And we'll be more than happy to visit, touch base, Zoom, fly to meet you, whatever.
All right. And I think it's mpowerapproach.org. And
yeah, the letter M, the word power, and then the word approach, mpowerapproach.org.
Yep.
That's right. That's right.
So we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So, Tim, thank you so much for joining us today, and glad to be able to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of John and Tim.
That's true. That's true.
And to 10 more. And if you'd like to meet these guys, you can have the opportunity, go to the website, maybe say hi to them at the booth at GMHC.
That's right, November of this year.
Yeah. And thank you again for joining us on this episode of the Mission Minded Podcast.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Mission Minded. For more information on today's topic and show notes, please visit our website, itechusa.org. Mission Minded Podcast is produced by ITEC. The goal of this podcast is to inspire conversations about Great Commission participation. The views, organizations, and individuals represented, interviewed, and discussed on the podcast do not necessarily represent an official position or formal partnerships with ITEC.